What if the biggest assumption in modern technology is wrong? Everything we build, phones, laptops, even the entire internet, is based on one belief: that reality fits into zeros and ones. Right or wrong? That is perfectly logical. But that belief falls apart in the real world, because reality isn't perfect. It's chaotic, noisy, and unpredictable. In biology, cells divide with tiny errors. That's how evolution happens. In the brain, neurons fire irregularly, and that randomness powers creativity. Even stars explode, and from that chaos, new elements are born. In nature, chaos isn't the enemy, it's the engine of creation. And maybe it's time machines learn the same trick. I'm a chip design engineer turned tech founder. And today we will dive into the most mind-bending idea I've ever explored. An approach to computing where physics does the math. And it all began over a century ago in a very unexpected part of the world. Back then, the world was very different. There were no computers, but the same question was already haunting science. Could we ever truly understand the chaos around us? Back then, many scientists believed that the universe was perfectly predictable, which means if you knew the exact position and momentum of every particle, you could estimate, you could calculate everything that could ever happen. This idea came from the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace, who imagined an all-knowing intellect, later called Laplace's demon, a being that could see every atom in the universe and compute the entire future. No mystery, no randomness, total determinism. Sounds familiar, right? That's exactly how modern binary computing treats the world today. And this belief in a perfectly deterministic universe ruled science for nearly a century, until one man dared to challenge it. It was a young Russian mathematician called Andrei Markov. He didn't believe that the universe was a perfect machine. Markov saw randomness everywhere, in nature, in music, in language, and he refused to ignore it. So he became obsessed with a question most scientists avoided: can randomness be predicted? He became convinced that chaos wasn't chaos at all. It followed certain patterns. So he built a simple experiment. He took something that looked unpredictable and measured how often one state follows another. Today is raining. And if today is rainy, there might be 70% chance it's gonna be raining tomorrow. And might be 30% chance it's gonna be sunny. And he didn't need the entire weather history for that, he just needed the current state to predict what is next. And then came the breakthrough. Even randomness had structure. From one moment to the next, there was a fixed probability of moving to each new state. Step by step, those probabilities formed a chain, one that eventually settled into a stable pattern. This was a moment when he discovered what we now call a Markov chain. And this gave science something priceless, a language for structured randomness. It became a universal tool, a way to model evolution, molecules, weather, economies, and even intelligence. Just imagine, decades later, the same idea powered things like Google's PageRank and DeepMind's AlphaZero. It's crazy how this simple idea ended up changing everything. And if you watch till the end of the video, you will see it's even changing the computing. That was for the first time when the world seen an opportunity to predict unpredictable. Not exactly, but statistically. And then this idea collided with the most dangerous scientific project in history: the race to build the first atomic bomb. the Manhattan Project. At this time, physicists were racing to understand the most chaotic process on Earth, a nuclear explosion. The equations behind nuclear reactions were chaotic and basically unsolvable by hand. But what if they didn't need exact numbers? What if they could just sample reality, the way Markov had done? A nuclear chain reaction looks impossible to predict. Each neutron flies off, splits an atom, and releases more neutrons. Maybe triggering another reaction, maybe not. The number of possible paths is just astronomical. So how do you simulate chaos like that? At Los Alamos, one of the scientists, Stanislav Ulam, had an idea. What if, instead of solving everything exactly, we could sample randomness itself? In practice, that means if you repeat something random many times, the average result will reveal the true value. Look, if you flip a coin just 5 times, you can get 4 times head and 1 times tail, which may look wrong if the probability is 50%. But if you flip it 5,000 times, you might get 2,507 heads and 2,493 tails. And that's 50.1%, much closer to reality. And that's the law of large numbers. The more trials you run, the more accurate is the result. That's how Stanislav Ulam realized that instead of solving every equation exactly, you can run thousands or even millions of random trials and then average the results. Do that and you can predict the outcome of chaos. This was a genuine breakthrough. He brought this idea to his friend, John von Neumann. Yes, that von Neumann, who just designed the first computer that can store and run its own programs. Which is remarkable because this is the same blueprint behind every computer today. Together, they turned Ulam's hunch into real mathematics. They called it the Monte Carlo method, after the casino in Monaco, because it was just like gambling. Randomness, big numbers, and the law of averages. This allowed them to understand how nuclear chain reaction would behave without tracking every single particle. And that proved something profound. That randomness isn't enemy. It can be a powerful tool. The Monte Carlo method spread like wildfire, from nuclear physics to weather prediction, finance, biology, and decades later to AI itself. If randomness could help us simulate nature, maybe it could help us to compute, just like nature. In 1953, John von Neumann made one of the boldest proposals in computing history. Back then, every computer, digital or analog, tried to eliminate randomness. Noise, uncertainty. Those were the problems to get rid of. But von Neumann saw it differently. Back then, he imagined a machine that doesn't rely on exact numbers or perfect transistor devices, but could handle uncertainty and even keep working when the parts fail, just like brain, just like nature. This is when he proposed a totally new kind of computing system. Instead of calculating with exact values, a computer could calculate using probabilities. And this means that you could build a system that gets the right answer on average, using randomness itself as a computing resource. And this was the moment of birth of stochastic computing. And stochastic simply means something that involves randomness and changes over time. You know, as it often happens in life, when we have deterministic goals and stochastic execution. What's interesting, instead of representing 0.75 as a 32-bit number, he represented it as a random bit stream of zeros and ones. If 75% of the bits are ones and 25% are zeros, that means the value is 0.75. This is where probability becomes data. And here was the crazy part. These noisy little circuits could compute by simply counting how many ones appeared over time. He could add, multiply, and even teach a circuit to adapt and learn, using just a handful of logic gates. He called it stochastic computing, and unlike new radical ideas, this one actually worked. What's interesting, von Neumann himself believed that this might be the only way to build machines that could one day think. But von Neumann didn't stay alone for long. Across the Atlantic, at the University of Manchester, Gaines took the idea even further. His team built a machine called Rascal, the Random Access Stochastic Computing Experimental Logic. It was built from analog noise generators plus some simple logic gates. It was computing information from random electrical pulses. Yet from that chaos, the correct result emerged. Gaines and his team were stunned, because Rascal didn't just work, it performed computation with sort of biological resilience. Because you could cut a wire or burn a transistor, and you would still get the right result on average. For a moment, it looked unstoppable. But hidden beneath the excitement was a fatal flaw. Stochastic circuits needed long bit streams to get accurate answers. Thousands of random bits for a single number. So it was brilliant, but unbearably slow. And worse, because if two bit streams become slightly correlated, the math would just collapse. In 1978, researchers held the first conference on stochastic computing. Paper after paper, they reached the same quiet conclusion. It was elegant in theory. It worked, but it was too slow to survive. The same year, the Rascal was powered down, and the world moved on with binary. But not everything that goes dark is gone forever. What excites me the most about this story is that this was invented many decades ago and then buried, and now it's coming back, and not out of nostalgia, but out of necessity. Because today, modern AI demands so much computation and energy that data centers are hitting limits. Power grids and cooling can't keep up. And now it looks like the next revolution in computing might not come from better GPUs or smaller transistors, but from something far more radical: learning to compute with probabilities and trust noise. And I will show you how stochastic computing works just in a moment, as well as a new chip that proves it on silicon. That's super interesting. But before that, we have roughly 3 months left till end of 2025. And my biggest goal for this year was simple: keep learning. And this year delivered on that. From building my tech startup to studying business at Stanford, none of that was comfortable or easy, but it was worth it. But the truth is, we all still need to catch up on AI skills. And good news, there is still time to change that. I think keeping up with AI is essential. Because already now, people who know how to use AI tools are replacing those who don't. That's why I recommend you to join me at this 2-day AI workshop by Outskill. They are hosting a live workshop this Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. EST. The feedback on this course from you guys was incredible so far. This course normally costs $395, but in this video I partnered with Outskill to provide 1,000 free seats for you. This offer valid for only 48 hours as a part of pre-Halloween sale. It's a fully hands-on AI training from experts at Microsoft and NVIDIA, people who've actually built this industry. In just 16 hours, you will cover more than 10 AI tools, AI in Excel, sheets, and presentations, building AI agents, automating your workflows, and more. You will also get access to a learning dashboard to connect with other builders, plus bonuses worth over $5,000 if you attend both days, including a prompt Bible and a personalized AI toolkit. All of that is for you, so you can enter 2026 ahead of the curve. Register right now through the link below or scan the QR code here, and thank you Outscale for sponsoring this episode. Right now, one company is turning the idea of stochastic computing into real silicon. Normal computing is building a stochastic computing chip. But don't let the name fool you, because nothing about this is normal. It's probably one of the most radical ideas in computing. They are building machines that compute in probability and use noise as a computational resource. Let me explain. Traditional chips, CPUs, GPUs, TPUs, are architectured for precision. This means everything has to be perfect. Every clock edge is controlled, everything should be synced up, voltage levels have to be perfect and clean, timing should be perfect. That's why modern computing consumes so much power, because it spends enormous amount of energy forcing transistors to behave perfectly. Normal computing takes a different approach here. They accept that electronics is actually a physical system, full of noise, drift, and randomness by nature, and they're harnessing this to compute. To introduce this random noise, they're operating chip at lower voltages, intentionally close to the physical limits. When this happens, transistors no longer cleanly switch between 0 and 1. Instead, they enter a probabilistic region, sometimes switching too early, sometimes late, sometimes not switching at all. And this is normally where traditional chips fail, but they are intentionally pushing devices into this dangerous zone and capturing this randomness as a computational resource. Now you may wonder, but why? The thing is, many of the modern scientific problems, from simulating molecules in physics to training AI models to solving global optimization, can all be described by stochastic differential equations. Even generative AI runs on this idea. Models like Sora and Stable Diffusion don't simply generate images or videos out of thin air. They solve stochastic differential equations step by step, gradually transforming random noise into structure. And under the hood, diffusion models are just controlled stochastic processes. And here is where things get interesting. Because GPUs are designed for graphics, and they can do very well matrix multiplication. But they are not good at solving stochastic differential equations. And if you force them to, they can do it, but it's slow, power-hungry, and absurdly expensive at scale. And there is clearly a huge demand to find a better, more efficient way to compute it. This is where normal computing comes in with a new way of thinking. Their chip is not trying to solve long equations the way GPU does. Instead, it uses physics to do the work. Instead of doing millions of precise calculations step by step, they let the system to move through many tiny random steps and find the answer sampling probabilities. If there is one thing you can take away from this video, when your life feels like chaos, you don't lose sanity. In fact, you are sampling the reality. Now, let's figure out how stochastic computing works. In binary computing, numbers are stored precisely. For example, if we take 0.75, a possible bit stream for 0.75 could look like this. You just count how many ones and zeros there are. What's interesting, the order of ones and zeros doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that these bits are random, because as soon as they start to follow any particular pattern, the math breaks. Here is the elegant part. If you take these two numbers, A and B, and you want to multiply them, you can send them through a simple logic gate, and the output will automatically become the product of two values. Imagine that A is 0.5 and B is 0.5, and you want to multiply these two numbers. So what you do, you feed them bit by bit into a simple AND gate. This device gives you 1 only when both inputs are 1. Below, you can see the resulting bit stream. Here, 4 out of 16 bits are ones, and that's 0.25, or 25%. You see the beauty of this approach, that you can do multiplication, complex multiplication, using a simple logic gate instead of complex and massive multipliers. And that's the power of this approach, that it turns hard math into very simple logic using randomness. Why is this a big deal? Because in modern computers, multipliers are expensive. They use thousands of transistors, burn a lot of power, and take up a lot of area in the chip. And chip area means money. But in stochastic approach, instead of using thousands of transistors, you can do the same operation using one simple gate. This is the power of this approach. And this can save a lot of energy when you scale it to millions of operations behind the modern AI workloads. The catch? The accuracy in this approach comes from the law of large numbers. The same idea Stanislav Ulam used during the Manhattan Project. Basically, the more random samples you take, the closer you get to the true answer. So, stochastic computing makes a simple trade-off: speed for precision. This is the same trade-off that killed Haskell in the 1960s. Back then, computers demanded exact precision. But today, AI doesn't need perfection. It needs speed and efficiency. Have you ever thought, where do these random bit streams are coming from? Because you need an actual source of randomness. And this is exactly where things can get wrong. Because if your randomness isn't good enough, your entire computation collapses, and you don't even see it happening. When I used to design chips, we used a special circuit. And this circuit, I will put the name here, basically spills out the long bit streams, which look random. The problem is that this one is not fully random, because the output is predictable. After a certain number of bits, it loops in again, so it repeats itself. And once this happens, your probability streams become correlated. And correlation is death in stochastic computing. Obviously, this won't work, and we need another source of randomness. And another simple option is to use an analog device. For example, a resistor. Every resistor produces tiny, unpredictable fluctuations called thermal noise. And you can turn it into a stream of truly random bits. This kind of randomness that computers can't fake. Actually, in this case, bit streams will never repeat in the lifetime of the universe. This will work. And now your math behaves. And it isn't just computing anymore. It's actually physics doing math for you. To do this, normal computing uses an algorithm called a lattice random walk. Think of it like searching for the lowest point in a landscape, like in a valley. In this case, a GPU would calculate slopes and gradients and solve long equations to get there. Normal's chip doesn't bother with all that math. Instead, it takes many tiny random steps. Each step looks random, but guess what? It's a Markov chain. And each next step depends not on the whole history, but on the current state. And it's not wandering blindly. Physics biases the steps. Energy, noise, and constraints gently push the system in the right direction. So even though every step is small and local, over time the whole system drifts towards a statistically correct solution. That's the genius of this approach. Not heavy, hardcore matrix math, just tiny physical state changes. They just let probability to do the work. Normal computing has already built the first prototype, and it's already ramping it up in the lab. This one is a proof of concept to show that stochastic computing in silicon actually works. It's designed for generative AI, for image generation. And the second one, already in development, will target video generation. But this idea comes with real challenges, because this isn't a general-purpose computer chip. It only works for a specific class of problems, those that can be described as stochastic differential equations. And that covers many AI and physics problems, but not general computing. Scaling is another question mark, because the prototype is here, but no one knows how this architecture will behave, and we try to connect thousands of them, something we are doing right now easily with GPU clusters. So the idea is powerful, but it's not ready for prime time yet. There are still many engineering challenges ahead of them. Just think about it. If they solve them, it could redefine how we compute. Just imagine noise could replace multiplication. Physics could replace math. And what seems radical today could become the new normal. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. I would love to hear. And honestly, this video was a little bit stochastic. It took a lot of research and reading lots of papers. So if you enjoyed it, the best way to support us is by giving this video a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post deep dives there, and to my newsletter. All the links you can find in the description box below. And now you may like to watch this episode where I break down step by step what it takes to build an AI supercluster on the example of the largest AI data center in the world. Check it out. Or this episode where I explain how ternary computing works. And I will see you there. Ciao.